Welcome back to Sprague River Homestead on your Top 5 Question Tuesday. So last week we talked about your top 5 questions about incubation. This week we're going to talk about your top 5 questions about incubator fails. It does happen no matter how good you think you're doing and your best intention. Sometimes things just don't work out. So we're going to see what the top 5 questions are and see if we can help you with them. Okay, so your first question is, I have chicks that are hatching and they make it out of the eggs, but then they're dying. Or they're not making quite all the way out of the eggs and they're dying. What's going on? So this can be a number of things. You could have mineral deficiencies in your chicken flock. So first, I would adjust what you're feeding out there. If you know that you're on a good ration and you know your protein and mineral counts in your flock are good, then you'll want to next look at your egg date. We don't hatch anything over 10 days. Your fertility drops huge, and even if you do get a live chick, a lot of times what happens is they're very, very weak and they really don't make it and they don't really thrive. So 10 days is the maximum that you really want to use from the time that they are laid to the time that they hit the incubator. Less is always better, but 10 is the max. Especially in turkey and duck eggs, you find that the fertility rate plummets after 10 days. I've had chicken eggs that I've incubated all the way to day 21. But there again, I got weak chicks that didn't do so well. So 10 days, 10 days, 10 days. That's what you want for the max on your fertility. The other thing that could be going on there is you could have a humidity problem in your incubator. Especially if your chicks are starting to, pip. They've got a little hole, they're starting to come out, and they die. What could be happening there is they could actually be getting what's called shrink wrapped. And that means that the inside lining of the egg is actually drying out and bonding onto the chick, and it can cause suffocation. They'll fatigue out because they're trying to fight it and they can't, so they can't get out. The other thing that could be happening, especially if you have kids in the house, everybody gets really excited during a hatch and wants to keep opening the incubator and looking at things. Don't do it. Every time you open it, you mess up the heat again. So you don't want to be in and out of that incubator, and that includes the entire incubation cycle, not just at hatch. Every time you do that, you can adjust the temperature in your eggs just a little bit, and it can cause all kinds of growth issues in your chicks. So if you're having trouble with them hatching, I would look at those things, see if there's an adjustment that needs to be made, and go from there. Okay, so your next question is something that happened to me a lot in Mississippi. We used to get spring storms. So this one is, my power went out, now what? Depending on the kind of incubator you're using, you need to take quick and decisive action regardless. Some things can be saved, some things cannot. It kind of is going to depend a little bit on the duration of your outage. I have had outages of up to 6 hours and still saved a hatch. If you're going 24 hours, chances are not good. What you want to do, the minute you know that the power is out, if you are home, and I realize if you're at work that there's probably nothing you can do, you can go get a thick blanket, thick towels, and wrap over and around that incubator. What you're trying to do is just mitigate your heat loss. So what you're going to do is very carefully pick it up, lay something underneath it, and fold it all the way around. Now, be hyper vigilant over the fact that if your power comes back on, this now becomes a fire hazard. So the whole point is to try and keep the heat in without starting a fire if the power should come back on. This is why I don't recommend leaving them wrapped all the time. I know people who do this. Hey, that's your own liability. That's not something I'm going to do. But just layer, layer, layer. If you're using a cabinet incubator, it's the same process. You just want to cover it with something big, a blanket, huge fluffy towels, several towels. If you've got it in an area that maybe you're concerned about the heat being a little low, like I keep mine in my garage. If I was to lose power out here, I'd probably go 3 and 4 layers thick, trying to make sure absolutely that I didn't lose any heat out of it. So if your power goes out, it's not game over. But what I would do is probably 5 or 10 days, depending on where you are in the incubation cycle, I would go ahead and candle those eggs again and see if they look like they've made it or not. Sometimes they pull right through. The fuller your incubator is, the better they will take a power loss. If you've got like 3 eggs in a great big foam incubator, chances are you're not going to keep them warm enough, especially on a power outage over about 2 hours. If you've got a full thing of 42, because those eggs will hold heat, and if you get in there and you wrap them, chances are, at least, worst case, if you lose some to the outside, you will still get a hatch to the inside. So if you lose power, just make sure you are doing everything you can to trap that heat in, and hope. Send a little prayer up, because that often helps too. Question number 3 is one that nobody wants to deal with, and everybody who incubates does at one point or another. I had an egg explode in the incubator. What do I do now? It's gross. It's one of those things we just kind of suck it up. I actually had a goose egg explode in the incubator over the weekend. It happens. So what you want to do is you want to go ahead and pull everything out. Keep in mind that your eggs can sit out for up to 30 minutes without a huge ordeal. So you're going to want to take it out. Clean everything that you can possibly clean as quickly and efficiently as possible, and disinfect. And this is a big key. Keep in mind that if an egg has exploded, wept, anything like that, it's because there's been bacteria in the egg a lot of times. Or you've got a chick that died and it's the gas of the decomposing chick that actually causes the egg to burst. Either way, you have a bacteria going on in there. So what you want to do is you want to quickly and efficiently go ahead and get that thing cleaned out as much as possible. Now, when you have an egg explode in there, most of the time it's going to get on the other eggs. It's just kind of the way that it works. You can make a couple of choices here depending on how far you are into the incubation cycle. If you're very, very early on and it's not a huge loss, you can toss them. I mean, it's not perfect, but you can toss them out. If you're most of the way through an incubation cycle, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and pull out the candler, look. If I think it's a viable egg, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mix up a batch of my cleaning solution, and I'm going to go ahead and spot clean. The difference between that and the regular cleaning solution where you actually immerse the egg in it, you want to be very, very careful, because now you've gotten further into the cycle. You don't want to risk cooling that egg too much. So I'll mix up a batch of the cleaning solution and I'll just spot clean and try and get it off, and then put them back in. There's no other real good way to do it. I know people who will discard an entire batch. I've never had to do that. Sometimes you'll miss a spot of goo on another egg and the egg still hatches fine. So the big thing is, for the sake of everybody's sanity, because an exploded egg is pretty disgusting, just do your best to get it cleaned out as quickly as possible. Sanitize everything again and put everything back in. Okay, number 4 is my chicks have hatched, but they aren't trying. What's going on? Usually when your chicks aren't hatching, the problem is a high humidity issue. This is one of those things where if you watched the last video and I talked about the importance of buying the little gauge that shows humidity, this is part of why you want it. If you've got too much humidity in there, you can cause respiratory problems in your young chicks, and they will never hatch, or never dry out, rather. So if they're not dry, you don't want to take them out, because they'll get chilled very, very quickly. So if you've got a humidity issue, if you've got one of the foam incubators, you can usually pull a plug. There's usually some little red plugs on the top that allow for more airflow. Just go ahead and pull one of those out. If you have some little incubator and it doesn't have that, you can maybe prop the door up just a little to get the humidity to drop. If you're using something like the Brinseas or any other digital base, dial it down. That's that easy. But if they're not drying out, and keep in mind they're going to be wet for a few hours yet, especially if you've got humidity up high enough for a good hatch in the rest of the incubator. But if they're not hatching after not drying after 2 or 3 hours, you definitely got too much humidity. Also, if you're looking at the windows, because most incubators have windows on them, and you've got a lot of condensation on the windows, typically your humidity is a little bit too high. And you want to do one of those methods I mentioned to get a little more airflow in and drop the humidity level. Okay, so the last one is, I'm having trouble maintaining my humidity and my temperature during hatch. What do I do? There's not a whole lot of things that cause this problem, but there is one major thing that causes it, and that's people. Do not, during a hatch, open your incubator. I know it's tempting, especially if a chick makes it out and dies. You want to get in there and take it out. Resist the urge. Usually a hatch is only going to take about 24 hours to complete. Go ahead and leave it in there. I know it goes against every principle we have as homesteaders to leave a dead animal in there. But believe it or not, unless you can be that quick about getting it in and getting it out, every single time you open that incubator, you are causing a heat and humidity issue. You do this more than once or twice, now you're more likely to have chicks that are getting shrink wrapped into their eggs because the humidity level has dropped. You're more likely to have chicks that are getting chilled, and it's just not a good deal overall. So despite the urge, go ahead and absolutely leave it alone. If your humidity is not high enough during a hatch, if you didn't get it dialed in beforehand, oftentimes there are ways to increase the humidity without opening the incubator. I have in the past, when I've had my Hobavator, there are little air holes in it that you could actually take a turkey baster and drop extra water in, and they would go down, and even if it hit eggs, it would run down into the trays underneath. So you can do that to increase the humidity. Of course, if you have something digitalized, you can turn your humidity pump up, because I actually have a humidity pump on mine. If you're using a cabinet incubator that does not have a humidity pump, like this unit actually has air holes in the front, the water containment area is right here. So same thing, you just slide the air vents open a little bit further, put a turkey baster in, squeeze some extra water down into your reservoir. So there are ways to do it. If heat is an issue, I'm going to say that for the most part, you've already got a heat issue to start with. But what you can do is be very careful not to touch the little dials on the top or anything that's hot, but you can put some extra towels on part of the surface area to try and keep the heat into the incubator. But if you've maintained good temperature all the way to hatch, and the hatch temperature is the problem, I'm going to guess there again, it's somebody's got fingers in the incubator opening it up. So you do want to make sure that you're not doing that. I know it's tempting. They're cute. There's, somebody's having trouble getting out of the egg and you want to help them. Leave hands off. It's better for everybody in the hatch. Okay, so that's your top 5 issues that you have with the incubators. I know there's a lot of other things that can happen. If you've got a question, a situation that you need a little help with, go ahead and leave it in the comments. Send me a message, and I'll get back to you as quick as I can. And that's it this week from Sprague Homestead. Happy hatching!